now you have a central circle within the vesica piscis, and what that gives you is a very interesting thing here, because now we have contact points here, 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 and here. So when you take your straight edge and you connect those points with your lines of energy, you connect those points so, like so, like so, like so, and like so, from a circle dividing itself, from unity dividing itself, becoming two, by connecting the crossing points and the centers, by using the radius of the crossing points, you have now created a square within the circles. Do this exercise. Ponder what you're doing. Ponder the different shapes that naturally arise from division. From unity comes multiplicity. Now, unity, of course, can be properly manifested with the circle, like I taught you last week, from the monad, the central point, and then it ripples out in concentric rings, circles, ever-expanding energy from the midpoint. But Lawler says on page 23 as well, the very incommensurability of the circle indicate that this figure belongs to a level of symbols beyond reasoning and beyond measure. The incommensurability he's talking about, of course, is pi, the Greek letter pi. The mathematical number is 3.14159623 whatever. It's incommensurable. It never repeats the decimal point. It goes on forever. So, unity can be restated as the square, which I just showed you. The square can arise from the circle, which with its perfect symmetry, the square also represents wholeness. But the advantage of using the square to indicate unity is that we can comprehensively measure a square. That's very interesting, isn't it? In geometry, in the philosophy of the circle, this is the symbol of unmanifest unity, while the square represents unity poised, as it were, for manifestation. The square represents the four primary orientations, of course, south, north, east, west, absolutely. And this makes space comprehensible to us. So the circle belongs beyond the realm of reason and commensurability, and the square represents comprehensibility. Both figures can represent unity and perfection. And yet we have a fascinating situation with squares that I want to share with you as I produce another geometric figure for you, and as you learn how to do this yourself, the square gives rise to some of the most startling paradoxes that I have ever seen. And it is simply stunning as you draw it to show you these paradoxes. You, as a creator of universes, give rise to creation following the natural laws of sacred geometry. Creation arises through absolute, fundamental, pure paradox. It's one of the most fascinating meditations that I have ever discovered. By definition, the square is four equal straight lines joined at right angles. But a more important definition is that the square is the fact that any number when multiplied by itself is a square. The square is the result of a crossing. Multiplication is symbolized by a cross. And this graphic symbol itself is an accurate definition of multiplication. When we cross a vertical with a horizontal, giving these line movements equal units of length, say 4 for example, we see that this crossing generates a square surface. A tangible, measurable entity comes into existence as a result of a crossing. The principle can be transferred symbolically to the crossing of any contraries, such as the crossing of a male and female, which gives birth to an individual being, or the crossing of warp and weft, which gives birth to a cloth surface, or the crossing of darkness and light, which gives birth to tangible, visible form, or the crossing of matter and spirit, which gives birth to life itself. So the crossing is an action principle which the square perfectly represents. In fact, when we look at it, the word nature means that which is born. And all birth into nature requires this crossing of opposites. So the square came to represent our earth, and as such it symbolized the conscious experience of finite existence, of which is born into nature. And of course, this brings us to the problem of whether the sides of the square are curved or straight. Because if the overall reality of the universe is an endless curvature, an endless movement, yet there is consciousness which is capable of temporarily arresting this endless curvature, both conceptually and perceptually, these are segments of the universal continuum. So this objective consciousness might be seen as a reduced velocity of the universal consciousness and has its instrument in the cerebral cortex of man. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus likened it to a paralysis of vision such as one experiences with the sting of a scorpion, so he called it the scorpion's sting. Now Pythagoras taught, though, that the experience of life in a finite limited body, the whole point is that we are supposed to specifically find and discover the manifesting supernatural existence within the infinite. He did that, of course, through mathematics and geometry. Look at the geometry of that magnificent tree right there. So we concentrate on the finite aspect itself, intrinsically a power to express the infinite. So this does not mean concentration on finite material effects, but on the abstract principles revealed in the finite world and the causes which create and support this embodiment. So Pythagoras himself, his mathematics was limited to whole numbers, and he indicated that these whole numbers are actually arrested states of the finite world. And he said, universal expressions within the measurable geometrical frame of the square is a profound symbol of finite perfection. And that's what the workbook shows us, is this theme. Well, the Hindu and the Buddhist philosophers, they were concerned because they didn't want the consciousness of humans to be preoccupied by this segmented perception of reality. And they use a very interesting analogy on this also. The analogy is really wonderful. They say, life is like a necklace of square beads. And these are tangible objects. And they say we can liken these beads to movements or to moments or events. And to be absorbed by this succession of limited frames is the illusion. The limited frames themselves, each one of the individual particular beads, are not the reality. Whereas only the inner thread of the necklace, the unimaginable continuum, is what reality is. But they use this image to say, we are given life one day at a time, in a successive period of moments, and that's not the ultimate reality. The ultimate reality is a continuum, but we can actually take segments of this continuum and represent them with perfection the circle and the square.